It's been a year since the release of Tekken 8, a game which fans of the series had been eagerly anticipating since the last installment, Tekken 7, releasing 7 years prior, or 10 if you count the arcade release. Tekken 8 has had its ups and downs throughout its 12-month lifespan, so I thought why don't we take a look at all the game has to offer, and where I think it ranks across the entire discography of the franchise. Now first things first, I've got to start the video off by saying this. I consider myself as a Tekken casual. Although I've been a fan of the series for a couple decades now, what truly drew me to Tekken was the stories. Although the gameplay played a huge part as well in converting me into the fan I am of Tekken. To put it simply, I'm decent, I can hold my own, but my fundamental knowledge of the gameplay is kinda ass, I'm not gonna lie. So please keep that in mind when going into this video. There won't be too much talk about no 442, backdash, this or that, or any of the true competitive elements when it comes to the Tekken scene. This is simply a video coming from someone who enjoys the Tekken game franchise itself. Simple as that. But without further ado, let's get into this video. Now before we get into all Tekken 8 has to offer, we have to talk about the overall aesthetic of the game. Tekken 8 by far has to be the best looking Tekken game yet, from the character models to the stage designs. It's all hits, no misses here. Selfishly, I want the developers to remake some of the older stages in the series and add them perhaps as like a DLC or something for Tekken 8. They honestly did such a good job here, and it really makes you that much more immersed when playing the game. The menus are also decent here, having a simplistic look which I personally feel complements the rendered character model, which you're able to choose here for your own personal menu screen. Lastly, we have to talk about the soundtrack, man. If there's one thing I love about Tekken, one thing I love more than anything, it's the soundtrack. I'm happy to say that once again, they did their thing here. They did their thing, simple as that. Now I will say in terms of where it ranks in comparison to other Tekkens, it doesn't make my personal top 3. But that's just for me, it's no jab at Tekken 8 per se, but I just feel like it doesn't quite reach the levels of, let's say, Tekken 5, Tekken 4, Tekken 3, Tekken 2. But it's definitely decent. Tekken has set the bar so high for their OSTs that it's almost an impossible job to outdo themselves with each release that comes after. There's definitely some bangers when it comes to this soundtrack though. Overall, when it comes to the entire aesthetic and visual look of Tekken 8, they did their thing, man. Tekken 8 has a few different areas when it comes to its story modes. The main one being the Dark Awakens story campaign, which drives all the most relevant stories forward. Along with this, as a part of the Heihachi DLC, we also got a few additional chapters of the story titled Unforgotten Echoes, which goes over Heihachi's big return. This man ain't ever gonna die, is he? And lastly, character episodes. They made a return here in Tekken 8. I'm sure we were all elated when that was first announced, right? In all honesty, character episodes were improved in Tekken 8 in comparison to the last game, where we only got like one singular fight before getting somewhat... Now let me just keep it real, it was a lackluster CGI ending. I honestly don't think there was one memorable ending in Tekken 7 that I truly enjoyed. There was a couple that I thought were decent, but to keep it real, there was some that I hated, man. Enough said, man, enough said. I'm still not a fan of character episodes here in Tekken 8, but what I will say is they are far better than Tekken 7. You play about 5 fights in total, including a final boss for your character's episode, which leads to the character's ending. It kinda was reminiscent of Tekken 4 in a way because there were a few endings there that after the main boss, which in that game was Heihachi. There were times that you'd have an additional bonus fight after the fact that would play along with the ending of your character. I don't think this was the case for every single character in the game, but I remember specifically there were a few there. So this has similar vibes to that, and some of these endings I thought were pretty decent and had a similar charm to the Tekkens of old. However, unfortunately, some characters which many hoped Tekken 8 would be the time for their stories to be revived, sadly just didn't deliver. I say for Tekken 9, just bring back the way story mode used to be instead of including these character episodes. We can still keep story mode how they do it here in Tekken 8, but just replace the character episodes with what we all know and love. Like, don't get me wrong, I am a fan of the story campaign itself, but I feel like for character episodes, instead of just having these lackluster fights that lead to nothing really, no real progression of the character, just bring back the way they used to do story mode. I feel like it won't really affect anything that has to do with the main story, so I just say why not, man. I might be in the minority there, but that's me, man. That's my opinion. Now, on to Tekken 8's main story mode, The Dark Awakens, where we continue the Mishima Kazama bloodline saga. The story revolves around Jin Kazama, who, with some help from other notable characters from the series, is on a mission to defy his fate, leading to a final showdown with his father, Kazuya Mishima, perhaps for the final time. An immediate positive for Tekken 8 story mode is the fact that just about every character gets a chance to shine throughout the story mode. Although the level of importance for each character wasn't presented on the same level as the Mishimas, of course, it was still a pleasant surprise that at least some of them got somewhat noteworthy moments. And this is the main reason why I feel like instead of having character episodes, just bring back story mode, man. Just bring back the traditional story mode so that some characters that are fan favorites out there, like a Paul Phoenix, a Yoshimitsu, characters that players have grown to know and love, kind of have their own moment to shine instead of a little cameo in the main story. This story also introduced us to Reina Mishima, a character which through this story immediately became one of my favorites of the series. She a badass, man, I gotta keep it real, man. The story mode for this game was longer in comparison to Tekken 7, however still was short enough for most players to finish within less than a day. It had some cool moments throughout, including the return of Azazel and Jun Kazama, as well as a few chapters dedicated towards the King of the Iron Fist tournament, something I was very glad to see included here. My personal favorite, however, has to be the inclusion of Tekken Force within the big Avengers-like battle before the final battle between Jin and Kazuya. Although I will say this portion of the mode was probably the most challenging offline portion I've experienced throughout my entire time playing Tekken 8, even being more challenging than Azazel surprisingly. It was a welcome challenge nonetheless, and I was very happy to see it make a return here. Hopefully its inclusion within this story is a sign for bonus DLC content to come later down the line. The last few chapters of the story are dedicated entirely to the big Jin vs Kazuya fight, where you battle it out on ground and in space whilst both being in devil and angel form, before crashing down to earth for one last fist fight to end the story. This whole part of the story was amazing, especially that final chapter. A cool little thing they did here was having somewhat of a choice between having a good or bad ending. A telltale ending, if you will. As if you lose the final part of the fight against Kazuya, you will have an alternate ending where Kazuya prevails. The traditional ending, however, ends with Jin defeating Kazuya, finally putting an end to this bloodline saga. Or so he thinks. I know some people feel that this story could have been a bit better and thought that it was quite cheesy in certain areas, and to be honest, I do see a point here. However, I personally love this story. I honestly think, and even though this might be a hot take, that this is the best story mode they've done since going the route of story campaign modes in Tekken 6 and Tekken 7. The way in which the story ended as well, with the re-emergence of Jun Kazama by Kazuya's side, as well as the big reveal of Reina Mishima's devil form, gives us something to look forward to in Tekken 9. However, in the meantime, we actually got an additional DLC story expansion for this mode, which focuses around DLC characters Eddie, Lydia, and of course, the return of Heihachi. Now, the one thing I will say about this story, although I did enjoy playing it, I don't think I was a big fan of how they revealed Heihachi Mishima is still alive. Like, bro, we've seen this story like 5 times between the Mishimas at this point. I thought Tekken 7 was the final nail in the coffin when it comes to volcano throws. I swear we even saw Kazuya Mishima verify the body going into the pit of lava. I swear he saw it with his own eyes. Unless bro is Leroy Smith in disguise or something. Look at him! I don't know how he didn't see this big ass dude leap across the lava pit and save Heihachi. I don't get it. I personally don't get it. Now, I know in the bonus chapter for Tekken 7, Kazuya gets into a fight with Akuma. But bro, if you remember that scene clearly, Kazuya is just chilling on the edge of that cliff, just collecting his thoughts. Ain't no way Akuma from Street Fighter was quick enough to just emerge, just materialize right before Kazuya's eyes, just before Heihachi lands in that lava. There ain't no way, man. There ain't no way. But anyway, aside from that, this DLC is pretty cool. Eddie and Lydia get their time to shine here, and those trial chapters at the temple were cool to play through. Heihachi Mishima also looked like an absolute beast here, which was very good to see. So overall, this DLC and the story mode in general gets a big thumbs up from me. But Heihachi, how are you still alive, man? Tekken 8 offers fans a few modes to look at. Of course, non-gameplay wise, Tekken brings back the jukebox, which I was very much glad to see make a return here. Although the Tekken 8 soundtrack is good, you can't go past some of those classics from the originals. On top of this, Tekken 8 also includes other aspects of the game to improve your overall experience as a player. You can review your own as well as others' highlights from matches in replay mode. You can capture snapshots of in-game highlights in photo mode. You can even change your favorite Tekken character's look and stylize your fight HUD in customization mode. Now, on the topic of customization mode in particular, I'll be honest, at first I thought it was quite limited in what we can create, especially when you compare it to other games like the WWE video games, for example. It does seem quite limited on the surface, but once you go deeper into the mode's features, you can actually put together some decent looks for your characters. Yes, they probably could have expanded a little bit more here, but from what we have to work with here, it's decent. Now, on the topic of gameplay modes, Tekken actually has a decent amount of things to do here as well. Online modes with Tekken 8 include your typical ranked, quick match types, and player matches. Tekken 8 even includes a Tekken Fight Lounge, which basically plays like a My Park style navigation system, which only adds that much more to what this game has to offer. What online modes do need, however, is some form of a tournament mode, like a traditional King of the Iron Fist tournament mode added to the game, which I feel personally would truly polish off the options we have to choose from. In terms of offline modes, Tekken 8 brought back Tekken Bowl, a mode which I personally don't play too much, just like the, Tekken Bowling from back in the day. I don't play those modes too much, but it is a nice change of pace from regular versus matches. Speaking of, versus mode is here, where you can play either against a friend, the CPU, or spectate the CPU going against each other. Other modes like Arcade Battle, Super Ghost Battle, and Practice Mode also make an appearance in this game. Super Ghost Battle is pretty cool because you can come up against various other ghosts featured within the game itself, as well as coming up against other players' ghosts from across the world. You can even fight your own ghost, which I personally thought was a very cool addition when I first purchased the game. And then of course we have the main story, DLC story, and character episodes to wrap up this game's offline modes. I feel like Tekken Force or even a different type of mode being included here could enhance this game even more. However, there is one mode which I wanted to pay particular attention to, which is Arcade Quest. Arcade Quest is a mode that I actually neglected for a number of months, besides initially testing it out when the demo first dropped, but aside from that, I neglected this mode damn near till recently, to be honest. Only when planning to make this video was when I decided to give it a go. Now for experienced Tekken players out there, this mode may be a skip for a lot of you since this is basically a glorified tutorial mode for new players. However, for someone like myself who is familiar with the series but still trying to get a hold of all there is gameplay wise, I felt that Arcade Quest was actually quite a pleasant surprise. The fact that this game mode has an interactive story, crossed with a tutorial based system implemented throughout each chapter of the story, makes this game mode a must play, especially for new players to the series of Tekken. I found myself enjoying this mode much more than I ever thought I would, and actually found myself questioning why did I neglect this game mode for so long. It probably explains why I've been getting my ass whooped online for so long. Heihachi is too OP! Heihachi is too OP! Heihachi! Bro got yeeted! Honestly speaking though, Arcade Quest has a nice charm to it, and is definitely something I would recommend you guys to check out if you haven't already. Demotion match, damn, I was getting cooked that badly last time I played this. Now when it comes to the gameplay aspect of Tekken 8, I'd definitely say it's the most beginner friendly of the series by far, and that's coming from me. Something which immediately stood out to me when first picking up the game was the replacement of the rage art mechanic introduced in Tekken 7, which now only requires the push of a button to activate the rage art. Whereas in Tekken 7, each character had a different set of buttons needed to activate their rage art. This in my personal opinion was a welcome addition. Again, as someone who's behind the power curve when it comes to most Tekken players, I'm glad I no longer have to play a game of Twister just to activate a rage art. One button and it's done. That's all I need, man. I ain't trying to play no Simon Says just to try and finish my opponent. Along with the new mechanic of rage arts, Heat was also introduced in Tekken 8. And when it comes to this edition, I'm not as much of a fan of this one. In all honesty, I preferred the days where rage arts and heats weren't in the game. They're basically guaranteed get out of jail free cards. Don't get me wrong however, they do come in handy when you're backed into a corner of a round. Overall though, the gameplay here is actually pretty fun. I'd say it's much more fast paced than previous Tekkens in the past. Would I say it's my favourite style of gameplay? Yes and no. When getting into certain matches, the gameplay feels very satisfying as a player whether you're winning or losing in my opinion. But there are games where I feel myself and my opponent are spamming the same combo of moves or just spamming in general, and it kind of ruins the overall vibe and enjoyment I get out of the game. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm a self-admitted spammer when I get into a corner, man. If I'm backed into a corner, I'm on 1 HP, best believe I'm spamming the same buttons. Bro, I don't know what I'll be doing, but if I'm backed into a corner, best believe I'm spamming X and circle. I'm not going out like that. But to be honest, man, like I feel like in my personal opinion, I prefer someone who spams buttons over someone who spams the same combo every time. But that's just me, man. That might be a hot take, and I'm not shooting any shots here. Like genuinely, like I enjoy the gameplay for this game, and I do know there is a science to it. You know, like practice mode is there for you to learn, and that's why I've always liked Tekken. Having a practice mode where you can constantly evolve and improve your gameplay and game style is something that I feel makes Tekken games stand out amongst the rest. And of course, when it comes to executing combos you've learned in the practice mode, it can be satisfying. But I feel like there's those OP combos that people just rely on and use every single beginning of the round, and I'm just like, bruh, I can't deal with this, man. Just fight me, just roll it out, man. To my UFC fans, you remember that Max Holloway fight for the BMF title, where the fight was about to end and they just start throwing hands? That's my playstyle when it comes to Tekken games, man. I'm not the greatest, but I'm for sure gonna throw hands, man. Simple as that. But yeah, man, gameplay here, I would say they did a good job. But I will say, in terms of rage arts and heat especially, I'd probably put them on the shelf for Tekken 9. I feel like, yes, they are good for new Tekken players, but sometimes I just don't want to use these flashy gadgets and just straight up throw hands with my opponent, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like with rage arts and heats there, they kind of give you an incentive to use them, you know? But I feel like I miss the days of on like a Tekken 5, like, you don't know how a round is going to end, whereas in Tekken 8, if both of you are down to 1 HP and both have a rage art in the chamber, best believe both of y'all are going to use that rage art or try to pump fake it, you know? So yeah, in terms of the new features, I'm not the hugest fan, but I feel like for new Tekken fans, they're a welcome addition. But overall, gameplay wise, what can I say? It's Tekken. Tekken 8 is definitely up there as one of the better games of the series. When it comes to Tekken games, I believe that I am of a different opinion to most, as some of the games which many out there would consider the worst of the series in the form of like a Tekken 4 and a Tekken Tag 2, I remember quite fondly. I think this has to do with my personal preference though as a Tekken fan. As someone who is not a competitive player who takes into account game-breaking mechanics or newer features which allow button mashing or closing the skill gap, these things just don't really bother me as much as others when it comes to the overall assessment of the game. What I put more of an importance on is the aesthetic, story, and of course to a degree, the fun factor in gameplay which a Tekken game can provide. I honestly feel that Tekken 8 does accomplish this in some areas, but fails in others. For example, although I personally loved the story mode, I would be lying if I didn't say I do miss the old style of story mode where you could work your way up the stages with whichever character you wanted, leading up to a final boss. I know character episodes kind of fill that gap nowadays, but they just don't hit the same. The gameplay is fun, but features like heat and rage art do make the game a little too simplified to pick up in my opinion. The offline modes can be some fun. However, the difficulty of these offline modes just isn't quite up to par when comparing it to the earlier Tekken games. Offline could also use a Tekken Force type of mode to really pad out that offline mode catalog that much more. Extra content is always a positive. So far with DLC, it has been decent. And the expansion of the story definitely was a welcome addition. We'll see what future seasons have in store for us. All in all though, of course there are areas which can be improved by Tekken standards, but the thing I've always loved about the Tekken franchise is that no matter what game you pick up, each installment feels unique, and Tekken 8 is no different. We'll see what the future holds for the longevity of this installment. However, as far as Tekken 8 goes, it is yet another great game in the books for the series.